This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 131.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another video. How you doing, Benny?
Doing well, thanks. It's a good day today. How are you?
Good. You look like Indian Jesus. I said that
thanks.
this morning, and I don't know, maybe you need a longer beard, but...
I think so, yeah. I'm not really cult status yet, but hopefully I'll get there.
So, out of curiosity, has your boss said anything about your disheveled look?
No, they haven't said anything too negative yet. Mind you, they've only ever seen me with a beard. They've not, none of them have ever seen me cleanly shaven. So it could be that this is just standard Benny, I suppose. This is what they signed up for. But yeah, I'll definitely get a couple of comments here and there.
Do you think you're gonna get talked to if you ever shave it?
I'm not sure. I actually
we need your beard back.
It could
like
be
Samson.
Samson, exactly. I did also have a dream actually maybe last week at some point where I did end up shaving it, and like immediately after or for a decent bit during that dream, I felt the biggest pang of regret for having gotten rid of it. So it might very well be the source of my power. I don't think I'll be getting rid of it.
All right, well, whatever. Source of you had a dream. It was a nightmare where you shaved off your facial hair.
Great. Yeah, my dreams are weird.
Whenever I have like a small beard and I try to kiss my boys, they're always like, "Yeah, go away. You hurt me."
That's fair. Yeah, no, that's definitely a real thing. You know, it definitely gets pretty scratchy, at least in the early days. It eventually does get soft.
I can never get past that though. Like I can never it gets itchy for me. Like whenever I try to grow a beard, I grow a beard pretty quickly. It just gets itchy.
Right.
Anyways, this podcast is about beard and beard growing. We should get a sponsor that's just about like facial hair.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, our guest today, look at that segue. Our guest today is Max Lüpertz. And forgive me, Max, I beg you if I said your name incorrectly. So Max is German, so I get brownie points if I said his name right. And I guess I don't lose any points if I didn't. So Max joins us today. He has his own company where he does pre-sales support. He helps pre-sales folks as well. He was an SE, and he also had a hybrid role, kind of like myself. So kindred spirit.
Yeah, it's definitely a good show. Thanks for taking the lead on leading with his name, because you definitely got it better than I ever could. But yeah, no, definitely a great show for everybody here today. Max talks a lot about, even for experienced sales engineers, things that they could be doing to be providing more value, to their company and even to themselves to a degree as well. Talking about some of the challenges too that you have to go through as a hybrid SC around, just reaching out to prospects and kind of coordinating with an AE or with a salesperson to do that job as effectively as possible was also really cool to dive into. It was a good show. I got a lot out of it.
We do discuss buyer enablement, which is like something that Max wanted to talk about, but also Garen Hess of Consensus, like he has a book about it. And, we're trying to get him on the show to talk about that as well. So that's a glimpse to it. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you haven't done so, please leave a rating or review. It lets people know that this is a useful podcast. And I'm going to do two. I usually do one request, if any, but I'm going to be greedy today and do two. If you think this episode or any other episode that you've listened to so far would help another single person, I will ask you to actually share this podcast with them. And if they don't want to listen to it, I would suggest you tie them down and make them listen to it. It'll serve as both informational and torture at the same time. So, two birds, one stone. But with that, let's jump into the show. Good afternoon, Max. Is it afternoon in your time zone, right?
Yes, it's 2:30 p.m. here.
2:30. Well, good afternoon, good morning, Benny.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Max. We appreciate your time. For those who don't know who you are, and they should follow you on LinkedIn, by the way, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Ramsey. Hi, Benny. Thanks of all thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. And thanks a lot for all the great work you guys do for the pre-sales community. I love your podcast. I love your Leave No SE Behind initiative, that you use your network to help other people find a new job, hopefully. I really appreciate all the stuff you do for us and the community.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. My name is Max, and I am the founder of Pre-Sales Rockstars, and I would consider myself being some kind of pre-sales enabler because I teach software companies how to improve and how to leverage their power of pre-sales. And what I would like to achieve ultimately is to enable pre-sales to become some kind of unfair advantage in competitive markets, because I think that it's super important to stand out from your competitors, and that pre-sales is maybe your single best opportunity to do so, and to stay ahead of your competitors in those markets. That's
So
what I do.
How did you get to found or start Pre-Sales Rockstars?
Yeah. So I started in pre-sales about 7 years ago. So after graduating from university, I applied for something, for a job that was called pre-sales consultant. So I didn't really came into the whole thing by accident. I knew what I was applying for, but I had no clue what it actually meant. I had no idea about software business. I have got a business administration background, so I'm not a techie. I'm more a business person or industry expert. But I really loved the job, and after about a year, I transitioned from being a sole pre-sales consultant into an account executive role, and after another 4 years, I became the UK sales director and moved from Germany to London to run the local office. And during this time, I learned quite a lot of things. So mainly I learned how not to do things because I did so many mistakes all by myself because I didn't read any books. I didn't connect with anybody. I just got going and ran in all the different pitfalls that are out there. And after a couple of years, once I had figured out how things worked, I thought, why not share my experience with all the other people out there in the pre-sales community? So also the newcomers don't have to do the same mistakes that I've done in the past. So I'm uploading, for example, a video once a week where I'm telling about all the different mistakes that I've made, about all the fuck ups. And I think it's quite important to learn from all the mistakes and share them with other people because they can really learn a lot about this. And that was the idea when I started Pre-Sales Rockstars as also kind of a community and maybe my own coaching business to really enable other pre-sales consultants and SEs to become better at their job.
Fair. So actually maybe to that point, that's really cool and a really noble goal too, to kind of want to that you've amassed over just your experience. Maybe without sharing too much, but if you'd like, obviously more than welcome to.
Yep.
What are some of those mistakes that you've seen maybe a lot of typical pre-sales people make that cause you to then want to make that shift to do things a little differently?
Yep. This one thing I would like to talk about with you today is about being more proactive in the whole way how you do pre-sales and how you approach your clients rather than being a reactive person. So I've seen many pre-sales consultants who have all the knowledge and who are technical experts, but they are often, I would call, aggressively waiting by the phone for their client to call and then ask how to quickly fix a problem and how to overcome an obstacle. And I've seen many people being that reactive and waiting for a problem to arise rather than having a proactive approach by anticipating what is happening and what might happen on client side and mitigating the risk and anticipating what's happening. So this has been a significant mind shift for me because I was one of those people in pre-sales sitting there waiting for the client to ask me. But in the end, especially when I transitioned into a more salesy role. So I was also always part pre-sales, part sales. So I was kind of this hybrid guy. And having this proactive mindset and actively engaging with my clients, trying to help them throughout their buying journey has really been one of my key learnings. And this is what I'm trying to tell people, how to approach their clients and how to really manage their client relationship. And being reactive, being super passive, I think has been my main and one of the biggest mistakes I've made.
So how does one go from being proactively waiting by the phone to actually proactively helping customers? What is the tip that you can provide to transition someone from basically being a GoFor, because that's what we are. If we're just waiting by the phone, we're just waiting for someone to tell us to go do something, to someone who's actually leading a sales opportunity.
Of course. I think first of all, what is important to understand is that we shouldn't be looking at things from a sales process point of view, because the sales process is the wrong process for your client, and especially it's not a linear process anymore. So at one point in time, I changed my mind and my perspective and looking at all the things I do from a client's point of view. So instead of having the sales process in mind, I was looking at their customer buying journey and the different objectives they need to accomplish in order to make a purchase decision. So I wasn't that sales process driven anymore and tried to change the perspective. And in, I would say, 8 or 9 out of 10 times, the people I had been dealing with on client side, so my buying champions, they never ever had purchased a similar software before. So it was the very first time they were engaging in such a complicated process and procurement project. And therefore, they really didn't know what to expect and who they needed to talk to, who were the decision makers on client side. But I had been through the same process 50, 60, 100 times with my previous clients. So I was able to map out their buying journey, and I was able to also tell them, like, look, you need to talk to this guy in order to get the go here. You need to involve that stakeholder to get their approval for the whole thing. So because they were kind of lost sometimes, I was able to really anticipate and think 2 steps ahead of where they are in their current process and tell them what to do next. And this, I think, was really important. And most of the time they were really thankful, because I could also not just accelerate my purchase process, but also their buying decision, because they weren't running into any of these obstacles or last minute vetoes. I think this is the important part here.
Yeah, I really can't understate that whole idea of kind of almost reverse engineering that whole process to really put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. That's just good advice all around, right? Like, even certainly in the sales process, to be able to empathize with the buyer and make them feel as comfortable as possible. But even as in life in general, I went through this exercise one time way back when, I think it was like a conflict resolution training or something like that. And what the trainer had us do was, what was it? So first we essentially partnered up with somebody and had some fictional scenario take place. So I think it was based on real life, but we had to go through like 3 phases of something, where one was where like you pretend, I think, you're yourself, and then somebody else role plays this other person that you're going to be, I guess, working against. The second scenario was then you then playing the part of the person that you were initially maybe arguing or had a conflict with. So then you could then see their side of things and try to explain from their point of view. But for you to then understand that, because you're the one saying it, was a really cool exercise. And so it really helps you kind of see and put yourself in their shoes more so than maybe just imagining it, I suppose. And so from a buying process, to really kind of put yourself in the head of somebody that you're interacting with and that you're presenting all this information to and value to, is really good to allow somebody to shift a little bit to understand, oh snap, like what I would otherwise be telling myself is useless the way that it's being told right now. Maybe I should shift a little. So yeah, I love everything about that.
Yeah. I don't know what your experience is, but to be fair, my biggest challenge in sales has always been that it took my clients longer and longer to make a purchase decision if they ever came to the point to make a purchase decision. I mean, I have all those numbers, and you've heard them probably before, that about 1/3 of all purchase attempts in the end ends with no decision at all, because the buying group cannot come to a collective agreement, and therefore you're losing lots of deals, not to your competitors or because of the pricing, but simply because they cannot agree to buy anything. I don't know whether this has also been a challenge that you have been facing, that on the one hand it took them longer and longer to make a decision, if they made one at all. Does it resonate with your experiences, or?
So at least in my experience, it's hard to say, because I just started a relatively new job where that may be the case more often than not. And I'm still pretty new, so I don't have that exposure yet. At my previous company, though, a lot of companies were mandated to buy some sort of a service or software like the one that we were selling based upon regulatory requirements that they had. So there was a sense of urgency there that was beyond just maybe them wanting something, because they had to comply to be able to sell to certain areas. But I could totally see that being the case, though, where they just, go back to doing whatever they were doing previously just because they can't get that consensus. So I think that's totally valid.
I can comment on that. So in my role there, we have a lot of like good customers who've been with us forever, and they always buy from us. No, like they just buy. It's the new customers that we see this issue with, where they don't know what they want. And when I first started with the role, I didn't really know how to advise them. I just knew how to show them our product. I didn't really highlight what our product can do for them. And I felt like that was my mistake. And then another mistake that I did in terms of not putting myself in my buyer's shoes, my product, my business is the most important thing to me. Like I want to sell my stuff, right? My customer, that's not their primary business. So I assume it's important. Like the mistake that I did was I assumed that them buying from me was just as important for them as me selling to them. And I just took that for granted. It's like, oh, of course they're gonna buy. What else are they gonna do, right? And it dawned on me later on, like, oh, there is that do nothing decision where, you know, I can't make a decision between this guy, that guy, or just doing something in house. Let's just do something in house and see what happens. We'll patch something up together, and that's mainly because the SE didn't do a really good job, and by the SE I mean me, of showing them that if you buy from us, you're gonna save time, save money, whatever it is that they need to do. But yeah, like I see that quite a bit.
Yep. But if you ask me about the core skills a pre-sales consultant or solution engineer needs to master today, or let's put it that way, I think Ramsey, you mentioned this in one of your previous podcasts, that you often find SEs on a moving scale where you have sales skills on the one side and technical skills and product know-how on the other side. And usually every pre-sales consultant is somewhere in between with a more sales focus or being a product expert. So I would be on the far left side, which is sales here. Yeah. Was it you, Ramsey, who introduced this model?
I did.
Cool. So, and I like this, but I think there is now one more dimension. So of course you need to be an expert in the product. And of course you need to know the basics about selling software. But I think there's a third dimension coming on top now, which I would call buyer enablement, or providing a seamless customer buying experience, because I really see that this is becoming more and more difficult. So being able to convey the value of your solution from your client's perspective, this is one thing, but process related, looking at the customer buying journey, I think this is a whole new topic that we need to dig deeper into to really take our client's perspective, because you've probably heard about the fact that on average, there are 10 decision makers involved on a client side now to make a purchase decision, and they all have individual preferences. They all do have a different understanding of the current situation, and therefore it often clashes and no decision happens. And this group of stakeholders is really what we need to navigate and what we need to enable our buying champion to get through easily. And I think this whole new point of not looking at the product, of not looking necessarily at the sales skills, but guiding our clients with their buying journey, I think this is one of the key skills that will, within the next 3 years, I think, differentiate good from bad sales engineers and can really be the tip of the scale when people decide to go with one company, because they really provided this seamless and smooth buying experience where people didn't see any roadblocks, etc. So this is, I think, where I'm very opinionated about, which I think is one of the core skills pre-sales and SEs need to master, rather than just being a demo monkey.
So I have a follow-up on that, but I think Benny is asking the same question. He wrote a note. I'm not sure if it's the same question. So if I'm stealing your question, Benny, I apologize. I really don't care. Isn't that something that account managers would do more than SEs? Was that your question, Benny?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, I covered it.
Like, isn't that, like, generally speaking, like buyer enablement, procurement, all that, that's usually salespeople stuff. How would an SE be able to help with that area?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe I've got a different perspective on this because I've always been in this hybrid role who had to do everything. But talking to other account executives, there always was this little bias, because every time an account executive told the client, do this and do that now, accelerate your whole decision, the perception was always a little bit different, because the client always thought like, wow, the account executives just want to close this deal as soon as possible, and they don't necessarily have my own interest in mind, and they're rather pushing me to get to the contract signature as soon as possible. So I often had the feeling that the perception was the wrong one. I mean, the AE might have been only good things in mind and might just have a good intention, but because people do not always like account executives and sales guys, the understanding was just different. And using the same whole approach as a solution consultant and providing this kind of value to your clients can really help you to bond with your client on a whole different level, because you really have, as an SE, you only have your client's interest in mind. You want to help them achieve their objectives. You want your solution to fit to their needs. And I think if this comes from a solution consultant, this might be completely different than being the AE who is pushing there just to get the contract signature in place. So I think this whole model can be much, much more successful if it's more coming from an SE rather than from an account executive. But of course, the AE also plays an important role in figuring out who is part of the buying panel and who is deciding what. But I think the SE can take more of this responsibility and really help the client to provide value to the client on a different level than just product.
Oh, that's a really good point. And maybe if I were to pose a question, actually probably to both Ramsey and you, maybe start with Ramsey actually, because I know that he's in a role where for a while he's been both a hybrid AE, SE for quite some time. And I've always wondered, when you are kind of playing this proactive role with your prospect and maybe engaging more in buyer enablement, how do you gauge how not to oversaturate with them with too many messages? Like, how do you kind of know what's too much, what's too little, especially if you also have an account executive, adjacent to you that's also perhaps sending messages to them? How do you not bombard them with too many messages at once?
So you're asking me that question?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with you. Sure.
So I don't have an account manager. I am the account manager. I do have a sales director. And if at some point I feel like, oh my God, this customer is not answering my question or like not as responsive as I want him to be, I then ping my director, tell him like, hey man, you have a good relationship with this guy. Reach out and see how they feel about this and see if they're pissed off about that. So it's not both of us bombarding the same people. Like you're going to have a good relationship with their account manager to figure out who's going to go after what. And in my previous role, although I was only a pre-sales engineer, I had a weekly meeting with my account manager to figure out what deals he was working on. Like which ones we're going to close this month, which ones were on the bubble where the customer's not able to make a decision, stuff like that. And then I would go after different people within that team. So the account manager is working with the manager or director. I would go talk to the engineers, the influential engineers, and try to work out with them what their fears are and why they're not making this decision. So that's pretty much what I did. And then with that, so ended up talking to the managers, or they brought me in to talk to the managers to help out. So I was basically there to help out more than to push one way or another. I'm there to alleviate fear. Sometimes I helped them make the decision to not buy from us because their fear was valid and they couldn't buy from us. Like if they bought from us, it wouldn't solve their problem and they're just going to be pissed off at us later, to some of my account managers' dismay, right? So I don't know. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily about bombarding your client with lots of messages. So what I hated to do in sales at any time was sending emails like, hey, just checking in. How are you? How has your weekend been? I hardly ever send emails like this, but instead, when I was working with a client and they had a legitimate interest of purchasing our software, I always created a mutual action plan with them. Also reverse engineering the whole process, like you want to launch by the 1st of January. So we have to accomplish this, and that in advance. And I always took this mutual plan and then just told my clients, hey, we're currently in this stage here. Have you considered talking to this guy who might have a veto with regards to the IT? So I always try to send out useful information rather than just throwing case studies at them and look here, I've got this other webinar and this and that. Of course, I did this a couple of times, but I was really mostly trying to make meaningful progress with my clients throughout their buying journey and really sending them relevant information like, here, look, here's our ISO certification. Please take this to your Chief Information Security Officer to check if everything is okay in advance or whether we need to schedule a call with them. So I didn't bombard them, but I just tried to be 2 steps ahead of their game. So they were 1 step ahead of where they would actually be without my support. And my clients really appreciated this kind of feedback and they didn't feel like I was bombarding them. Instead, they really felt, hey, you helped us to make confident decisions and you really took us by the hand. And that was much, much better compared to all the other vendors who were just bombarding us with silly follow-up emails and those HubSpot templates, for example. So that was really, really cool. And in the end, I mean, I've done loss analysis with my client. Whenever I lost a deal, I tried to get them on the phone and ask them, hey, why did we lose this? But also when I had managed to close a deal, I asked my clients, why did you go with us? And in the end, very often they said, because of the way you treated us and because of the way you provided value to us, not just on a product level and helping us understand how your product can enable us to achieve our goals, but also on a level how to navigate the whole process and how to avoid all those pitfalls and how to launch like 3 months earlier than we considered initially. And this is really not, my clients didn't feel like I bombarded them. They really felt like this was value nobody else provided because they were all on this product level and on this HubSpot template email follow-up level.
So speaking of those emails, just checking in emails, I actually send those. But the difference is I think like I have the same customers. Right now I have 6 customers.
Yeah.
Right. And I have a very good relationship with them. So when I'm checking in, I'm actually checking in with my friends more than I'm checking in with the business side. And those people that I don't know that I'm trying to meet, I try to emulate what you just said, like lead with value, like provide information that could be helpful for them to make a decision. And being a hybrid actually is very helpful because I think of myself as a sales engineer.
Mm-hmm.
My customers think of me as a sales engineer who does quotes and asks for the PO, right? So if you were a pure salesperson who's just asking for the PO and not doing the sales engineering stuff, which is actually helpful to the customer, it kind of also feels like you're bombarding them more than you're helping them. So if you're trying to go into sales and you want to become a salesperson, I would recommend maybe trying out being a hybrid SE first, see if you like the role, because it actually brings a lot of credibility just being an SE who's helping out with quotes versus being a person who does quotes and helps out with the SE stuff. And so just my 2 cents there.
No, I fully agree.
Go ahead.
That was my journey as well. I started as a pre-sales consultant and slowly transitioned into the role of an account executive. And I first had to learn how to write proposals, but I never tried to push the sales part too hard. It was really all about providing value and trying to be different than all my competitors. And when they told me like, hey, you have been the reason we decided to go with you, maybe the product as well, but when they told me, hey, it's been you and the way you treated us and the way you helped us, I mean, that was awesome.
Well, a lot of products do the same thing. Like if you go with Google Cloud or Amazon AWS or Azure, they're kind of similar. They do the same things. It's just like whoever gets to be able to help you more is the person who ends up buying from you. And just if the SE does their job right, if you're not a hybrid SE, if you're just a pure SE, if the SE does their job right, it makes the salesperson's job so much easier to actually close the deal, right? And vice versa. Like if a account manager qualifies an opportunity right, and then you show up as an SE and do the job right, like it's basically a lot of teamwork that goes on. So I like that.
It's also a good point that you have mentioned, because I also have the feeling that many software solutions are becoming more and more similar to each other, and that it's getting just much more competitive. And especially now in the new normal, it doesn't really matter any longer whether you are a local supplier or whether you're a company from the other side of the globe, because there are no boundaries anymore at the moment. So it's getting even more competitive. And in my opinion, you have now 2 different opportunities and possibilities to handle the situation. You can either differentiate on a pricing level then, if everything is still the same. But in my experience, this isn't a super sustainable business model. And in Germany, we probably won't ever be able to be the cheapest vendor out there. And quality made in Germany doesn't count any longer in the software business. So I think this is not the way to go. But if you can really leverage your SEs to use this power and to really be different, not on the product level, but on the level how you engage with your clients, I think this is the cool thing. And this is what I'm trying to do with Pre-Sales Rockstars, really to enable pre-sales to leverage these powers and to become the game changer and the key differentiator, especially in those competitive markets. And that's what I say, because I think in the next 3 years, this will become more and more important. I mean, clients will try to use self-service solutions, but I think in complex enterprise sales, self-service will never ever help the clients to achieve their goals. And you always need the SE to get in there, explain how this applies to their business, how a solution could look like. And I think yeah, having those pre-sales people and SEs who know about their clients' buying journey and about their objectives is the critical thing for me, how to grow your business.
So the question that I have right now is, how did you figure out that buyer enablement was your unfair advantage? Like, was it trial and error? Or let you answer that question instead of me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, kind of trial and error. So when I started about 7 years ago, we had one single document in the company, which was called the technical requirement document, telling our client everything about their server infrastructure they needed, how to set up single sign-on, how to set up email notifications, etc. This was the only document we had back in the days. But over time, I just figured out that there were more and more stakeholders engaging. We made a transition from an on-premise installation into a cloud environment. Then we had GDPR in place, and all those different stakeholders that got involved all had different information needs. And so I was running around the company trying to gather as many documents, pre-starter guide, whatever information I could find to share it with my clients. I did this all without having ever heard of buyer enablement. That was my natural response to the more complex buying panel I was dealing with. So I was collecting all the information, trying to share them with my clients at any time to provide them with some upfront information. And I think about 2 years ago, I listened to a podcast from Garen Hess, the founder of Consensus, who I think many pre-sales and SEs consultants are familiar with. And he mentioned this whole kind of topic that was called buyer enablement. And then I had taken a look at information and research that has been published by Gartner. And those were the guys who labeled it buyer enablement. And I just figured out, oh, cool, I've been doing this for the past 2-3 years. I never gave it a name. I never thought that this was my unique skill. But in the end, I figured out this was what I'd actually been doing and what made me successful. So by just getting a feel for all the different stakeholders that got engaged over time and the more complex buying environment, I just happened to figure out that this was one of my key strengths. And then luckily Gartner gave it a name. And when I started Pre-Sales Rockstars, I first thought about doing another kind of software demo coaching until really I saw that, hey, cool, this buyer enablement thing and this hands-on proactive mindset, which I would call an entrepreneurial mindset, is actually what I can do for my clients to become better at their job.
Fair. Yeah, no, it's really cool actually when you have maybe a term like buyer enablement start to maybe like flow into the mainstream or kind of actually get defined by a company. Even though when you think about it at its root, like it seems like such a human experience. I know we talk a lot about like one of the most important things about sales engineering with your prospects is to be, and even just with your account executives that you're working with, is to be as human as possible. 'Cause really at the end, you're working with people. And so to be able to help somebody in a very genuine way, kind of find the way to value for their company. And, ideally that's by way of your solution, just kind of makes sense, I suppose, on a fundamental level. So I really like the idea of being very deliberate though, with respect to enabling your buyers to find value, however that may be. And then having a mindset to do that is just going to pay dividends. So yeah, that's great.
No, but I think you got to learn. I mean, you pick up new stories all the time, and then you can really use them and also tell our clients, look, one of my biggest clients I've ever been working with, a large FMCG company, they had in mind to launch like within 2 months after they've signed our purchase order. And in the end, instead of 2 or 3 months, it took them 7 months to launch because internally they had so many difficulties requesting a URL for the system from their IT. It took them forever to get a domain and HTTPS whatsoever. So basically lots of information they thought are going to happen within a super short time frame. That took them weeks and months, and therefore they were unable to launch their project in time and got beaten badly for missing their time frame. And I took these learnings and I put them into some kind of a checklist I then shared with all my other clients, like far beyond or ahead of the contract signature. But I just told them, look, if you want to launch by that time frame, please make sure you have all those information ideally upfront, because this can take you quite a lot of time. I've seen customers fail because of this stupid, simple thing, and because they didn't think about this before. So again, I was anticipating also post-contract signature what might need to happen, and they really valued this feedback because now they were able to make a much more confident buying decision because they knew that I was on their side helping them to launch in time to meet their personal objectives as well. rather than just selling the solution. So knowing about all the pitfalls post and pre-signature really has been cool. And they believed that I had genuinely their interest in mind. And that was really what I was trying to tell them.
And that moved you from being a salesperson or a sales engineer to what John Kerr calls a trusted advisor. Like now they trust you, and next time they need to buy something, they still trust you more than anybody else, and they're gonna come back to you. And
exactly,
yeah,
and that was really the cool thing. And it also, when I started in sales, I said yes to everything my client wanted from me. Even if my client had some ridiculous ideas about how to use our software, how to launch it, I always said, oh yes, that's totally fine, because I was scared that the moment I would say no to them, they would walk away because somebody else would do exactly what they wanted to do. And it took me quite a while to understand that sometimes you actually also need to challenge your clients and tell them, look, this is not how things work. If you do it like this, you're going to fail, like that company I've worked with in the past. And the day I started to say no, and the day I started to challenge my clients, they didn't walk away. Actually, they started to trust me much, much more, because finally they realized, oh, this guy is not trying to sell me something, whatever it takes. He's actually giving me advice and stopping me from making this move. And this is really cool when you really see it, like, hey, you have become their trusted advisor. This is probably the coolest thing, which I liked about being the solution consultant in my role and being that guy and friend to them.
the customer is not always right. If they were, they wouldn't need sales engineers.
Exactly. Yeah. But I was too afraid of the beginning. I was a newbie. I just said what they wanted to hear and thought this is the way how you sell, but it's not.
Well, yeah, the funny part about it, like when I first started, I was afraid for a different reason. It's more about the account manager.
Yeah.
Like I'm worried to disappoint the account manager, because if I say no and we lose the deal, me being a newbie, I didn't know that we're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Right. But it is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions we ask almost every guest. So, and Benny usually starts us off.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So, if you don't mind asking, I guess you actually just mentioned something that you, I guess, loved about the role, but do want to ask you as well again, what do you really love about being a sales engineer or a sales consultant, pre-sales consultant?
Yep. I really love the opportunity to work with so many different companies and also get a fairly deep understanding of their challenges and of their business. I used to work in the innovation space, so I had to deal with lots of strategic projects, how companies' innovative roadmap looks like for the next 5 to 10 years. So I was really close to new technologies, and really getting those insights into those different companies was the most amazing part. And also working with clients who were very passionate about the project was just super cool. So that's, I think, looking to so many different businesses from all around the world, having the chance to connect with many like-minded people was just amazing to me. I think that is what I enjoyed most about being an SE.
Right. For the second question, I believe this whole podcast was about that question, but what would you change about the role?
Exactly. I would really change the perception, first of all, so that we are more than those stupid demo monkeys who come in and do the same repetitive demo over and over again. And that companies really understand the value we can provide to the client, not just on a product level, but also on this customer buying journey level. And that we can be much, much more than those guys who are just sitting by the phone waiting for the sales guy or the client to call. And that also so first of all, the company needs to understand what we are truly capable of, but also we as an SE need to understand what our true superpowers are, and that we can really provide value to the client. So it's a shift of mindset on both sides, from the organizational perspective, but also from an individual perspective, that we need to become more hands-on, more proactive, and not hide in the background behind the account executive.
Nice.
Very cool. Now, everything that you've shared today is very wise, I would say, and a lot of it obviously comes from experience. But maybe on top of that, have there been any other books or tools or resources that have really helped you along your way that you'd recommend to other budding sales engineers and sales consultants?
Not necessarily books regarding sales engineering. So I'm always trying to look into different fields to enrich my knowledge. One book which I really liked is called The Gold Mine Effect by Rasmus Ankersen. It's about high-performing sports athletes, so professional football players, marathon runners, etc., and what makes them so successful and why they perform in such an outstanding manner, and why so many people, for example, from Kenya are so successful in long distance running, for example. So it's a really nice book trying to uncode this whole myth of talent and how good people can become by just training, and that sometimes you can even be too analytical, for example. So sometimes you can measure things to death, I would say. And let's say you have 150 KPIs, and because one of those KPIs is bad, you feel very bad about this rather than being happy about all the other KPIs, which are good. So sometimes I'm German, we like to look at those tiny little details, but sometimes going into too much detail can actually harm your performance, and sometimes you have to look at bigger terms, at the bigger picture. So it's a nice book looking at sports events and sports athletes, and then trying to convey information which we could use for our daily life. It's really, if you like sports, it's a cool read.
Very cool. That's a great recommendation.
I'm thinking about the last question, and we kind of also, again, we talked about it today, but so I'm going to change it on you. Hopefully,
Okay.
you didn't prepare it.
No.
Prepare for this one. So is there a deal that you lost that you're like, you feel like you could have done better, and what did you do to learn from it?
The deal that I had, of course, it happened to me that I've lost a couple of deals, but then it was really pre-buyer enablement, when I wasn't really digging into all the different stakeholders on client side. When in Germany, we do have a workers' council, so a group of people who are trying to protect their employees with regards to personal information, their data, and their work security. And they always have a very strong veto right. And in the early days, I was really like just believing in my buying champion who told me, hey, I've been talking to all the right people internally, everything is fine. Don't be nervous about this contract. And in the end, like 1 or 2 days before contract signature, the guy came back to me and told me like, I'm really sorry, the workers' council, in general, they like the idea of the tool because we're going to support the people internally, but because they haven't engaged in the whole process, and they have to be engaged in the process early on, they just said, we're going to stop this project here, just for the matter that we haven't been involved and engaged in this decision until now, when everything is almost done and over. So that was one of the days where I really didn't do proper buy enablement, and I didn't tell my buying champion to talk to the workers' council and which information he or she needs to provide. And this was really a last minute veto, which was so super easy to avoid because it has happened quite a few times before. And we always knew that those people from the workers' council would have a right in the decision. And that was really bad. And they didn't move any longer. So the whole thing was stopped there, and we haven't had a chance to turn this around.
Okay, so I guess what you learned is get them involved earlier. Know the sell. Actually, this is a good place where knowing the sales process or the purchasing process could help. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, final question of the day, which is not part of the not so fire round. If people want to connect with you, and talk to you, where can they do that?
The best thing would probably be via LinkedIn. If you could maybe post my LinkedIn profile, Max Lüpertz. It's impossible for most people to pronounce my last name and write it down. So if you would be so kind, Lüpertz.
Lüpertz. Okay, yeah. Lüpertz.
You don't even have the proper letter on your keyboard, I guess, to write the U with the 2 dots.
Yeah. All right. So just let you know right now, I'm not gonna say your last name in the intro. Max.
That's fine.
Of Pre-Sales Rockstars. Max
is fine.
Okay. All right, awesome. So we're gonna put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. This is show 130. We're gonna have presales.rocks, which is your website as well, on there. The person on your website looks very different than you, so that's not you, I assume.
It's not me now. I don't have red hair.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate your time. Thanks a lot for coming on, and cheers, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we're done. Thanks, Max. I'm not going to say your last name. Lüpertz. I am going to say your last name. Thanks, Max, for coming on the show. This was a really fun conversation. There's a big SE community in Germany. I don't know if you've noticed that, but we've had a few SEs who've turned into SE trainers, and I've recently talked to a few more SEs. So there are quite a bit in Germany, and it seems that it's SE world is booming over there.
I feel like that makes sense, right? Like, I don't mean to play into a stereotype per se, but I know that when I was going to school for like the international business side of it, Germany would always be noted for being very, very particular. I suppose, not in particular, but just like they very much value the details when it comes to whether it be technology or really anything, I suppose. And so for sales engineers, it's our job to kind of take the details and communicate them in an ingestible, valuable way. And I feel like a role like that is just that much more important in a society that values the details as they do in Germany. So I never thought about it, but it makes sense.
Well, sales engineers usually follow the customers, and there's a lot of like it seems that the economy in Germany is booming. There's a lot of different companies that require different kinds of services, so there are SEs to provide services with regards to that. So, but yeah, like, it was great talking to Max. So far, every German I've talked to ended up talking about sex for some reason, except for Max. So
A pretty open society.
yeah, maybe we should bring him back on the show just to discuss that for a few minutes.
It's true. Yeah, no, well, it was definitely a reproductive session. No, it was a very productive session, without a doubt. Yeah, especially the whole idea around buyer enablement, that kind of that third dimension that he introduced was really cool. And like just being able to put yourself in a buyer's shoe in the buyer's shoes and really deliver your sales process with that in mind was kind of a cool way to do things. And I could see that working.
Yeah, no, this was great. We're just going to keep it short. I don't think we need to belabor the point. Thanks, Max, for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. This is 131st episode. I never thought I'd be doing like 131st episode of this show. So thank you all for listening. Share it with somebody you enjoy. With somebody you know who would enjoy this show or would gain something from it. And actually, I want to interview customers. If you have a customer that you'd like me to interview, I want to understand, like talk about customer enablement and buyer enablement. I'd like to understand how they think a little bit better. I understand how my customers think. They're not necessarily the same as everybody else's. So share that information with me. I'd be happy to have a conversation with them.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Even if you're a customer yourself, if you ever had to buy something of the sort, I guess from some sort of a software company or whatever it may be, and you had to deal with an SE, might be an interesting conversation to kind of talk about what it was that you valued and what you thought resonated and things like that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I feel like SEs would be easy customers because we know what the other person's going through. It's like
so true.
Ever since I became an SE, if someone knocks on my door trying to sell me something, I've become a little bit more understanding. It's like, damn, you're brave. I no longer think you're annoying for knocking on my door. Now I think you're brave for knocking on my door. So so let's leave it at that. With that, this is Ramsey for Benny signing off.